Welcome back to The Explainer. Have you ever felt that just inexplicable, totally magnetic connection to a complete stranger? One of those rare moments where your own hesitation and logic violently collide with what feels like absolute fate? Well, today we're taking a deeply emotional, chronological journey through a really fascinating poetry collection by Anya Astra. It's called Poetic Push and Pull. We're going to break down the profound architecture of a lifelong romance that's mapped out entirely through spoken verse and really explore why this specific dynamic resonates so universally with all of us. The collection actually hooks us right from the jump with a simple question: have we met before? Which is immediately followed by this realization: a voice I cannot ignore. Right off the bat, Astra establishes the core mystery of the whole narrative. We have two souls who seemingly recognize each other across time and space. It taps directly into that jarring yet kind of beautiful psychological phenomenon of déjà vu. You know the feeling, right? Where a total stranger suddenly feels like a forgotten memory, completely throwing everything you thought you knew totally off balance? And the central mystery is perfectly captured by the imagery of a continuous line drawing of two hands, two distinct individuals, separate, but reaching out, connected by this invisible thread in the dark. It's such a beautifully minimalist way to represent a force that is just entirely out of their control. It perfectly sets up that magnetic dynamic at the absolute heart of their story. Now, to truly grasp what's happening in this collection, we really need to dig into the deeper psychology here. The poetic push and pull is basically the eternal tension between two competing forces in human nature. Think of the push as our instinct for self-preservation. It's logic, it's duty, the fear of getting hurt, or even physical distance. But the pull? The pull is fate. It's that terrifying, irresistible surrender to vulnerability, the gravity that just naturally draws two people together. As we go through this explainer, you're going to see these two invisible forces constantly acting on our characters. So let's jump right into the timeline, starting off with Chapter 1, A Cosmic Contract. This first chapter is all about their initial spark. It's where our lovers first encounter one another and really have to start negotiating the overwhelming gravity of their connection. And honestly, it is brilliant how Astra formats this tension directly into the text. The entire collection is written as this back-and-forth call-and-response dialogue. She uses italicized text to represent the questioning, hesitant push, and that is constantly answered by standard text, which represents the grounded, absolute certainty of the pull. It's a structural choice that turns the poetry into an active, ongoing conversation. You are literally reading the tension of two forces colliding in real time. Just listen to the deep contradiction captured in these lines. I was holding the weight of the push. I was resisting the tension of the pull. They're actively fighting this connection. They're trying so desperately to remain logical. But as the verses start to reveal, resisting fate is psychologically exhausting. You can feel the tension building, and it becomes incredibly clear that the pull is eventually going to demand a total surrender. And that brings us to Chapter 2, Witnessing the Supernova. Because as their undeniable chemistry grows, it can't just be contained between the two of them anymore. We get these absolutely beautiful, immersive vignettes that are narrated almost like observations from the outside world. For example, a bystander watches the woman tracing a line of gold at an art gallery. Later on, at this old, dusty bookshop cafe, we see them clumsily exchange books and a phone number. And finally, they're at this dramatic candlelit concert where the actual rhythm of the music mirrors their racing hearts. Their friends and even just passing strangers literally become witnesses to this cosmic event unfolding right in front of them. And all of this culminates in a genuinely thrilling turning point. Picture this. It's 3 a.m. He can't sleep. Logic has completely failed him, so he wakes his friend up just to drive him to the pier. He finally realizes the pull is simply way too strong to fight anymore. He declares, "It's the end of the silence and the death of the doubt." They meet up by the ocean under a bright moon, officially surrendering all their defenses to the pull. But then, the tone shifts dramatically as we enter Chapter 3, Surviving the Distance. This is where the push returns, only it's not some internal hesitation this time. It's a brutal, external, physical reality. Duty calls the man to war, violently separating the lovers literally just as they found each other. And the contrast Astra paints here is stark and honestly terrifying. On one hand, we have the lover safe at home, but her anxiety is just peaking at every single sound. She's memorizing phantom footsteps at the door, completely terrified of the postman. On the other hand, the soldier is surrounded by this blackened tide of war. He's tasting fear, but importantly, it's not a fear of death. It's the intense psychological terror that he's never going to see her face again. It really forces us to pause and ask this deeply emotional question. Is there a word for the wait between? It highlights that universal, agonizing space of silent uncertainty. When you're entirely disconnected from the person who holds your heart, time just stops acting normally. The push of the war and the pull of their devotion are actively tearing them in opposite directions. So, what is their only solution? Letters. A paper bridge across the blue is all I have to get across to you. Talk about powerful imagery. When the physical world pushes them thousands of miles apart, they literally write their way back to each other. Ink on a page becomes their absolute lifeline. It's a fragile but unyielding connection built across a vast ocean. Thankfully, the soldier does return, which leads us beautifully into Chapter 4, The Best of Us. This is where the breathless, chaotic romance of youth transitions into the quiet, steadfast reality of a lifelong partnership. The structure here gorgeously guides us through the life cycle of their enduring love. We start in year 1, signing a mortgage, laying floorboards, painting the halls. We take a breath, and suddenly it's year 5, tiny hands and nursery songs. Jump ahead to year 30, bicycles out in the grass, and the pure joy of grandchildren. And finally, year 50, turning the thin, worn leather pages of their history, looking at faded photos with silver hair. It's just a masterful summary of a life truly lived together. But what really elevates this whole collection is that Astra completely refuses to pretend this is some flawless fairy tale. The realities of building an eternal legacy require immense psychological grit. The pull of fate might get you in the door, sure, but actively fighting the push of your own ego, that's what actually keeps you together. They endure sharp, bitter words. They have to actively learn to forgive each other's worst mistakes. They constantly have to yield the leading space to one another and overcome their own stubborn pride. The push never really vanishes, does it? They just learn to navigate its friction as true partners. Which leads us to this profound realization near the end. 2 ambitious writers fell in love, then paused, and became poets to the world's applause. Their lived experience, every single argument, every handwritten letter sent across an ocean, every quiet, exhausted moment on the porch, that is exactly what transformed them. They didn't just write poetry, they lived it. And thinking back to that imagery of the reaching hands, we finally understand the true context of that quote from early in the book. It's a knot we are tangled in. The push and the pull, they weren't forces meant to break them apart. Not at all. They were the very friction required to tie an absolutely unbreakable bond. Anya Astra's collection leaves us with a lingering, provocative thought. It asks us to look really closely at our own lives, at those invisible forces constantly acting upon our own hearts. So I'll leave you with this. If the stars don't forget where they've been, whose is the voice you cannot ignore?